Sometimes the truth is not hidden because nobody saw it. Sometimes it is hidden because nobody bothered to look. The late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across Maple Grove Drive, a quiet suburban street where children rode bicycles, sprinklers hummed across freshly cut lawns, and neighbors exchanged friendly waves from neatly trimmed front porches. It looked like the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where ordinary days blended together until something unexpected changed everything. Marcus Bennett eased his pickup truck into the driveway of the modest brick home he had spent 12 years paying for one mortgage payment at a time. His shoulders felt heavy after a 12-hour shift at Fire Station 31, but there was satisfaction in the exhaustion. Hours earlier, he had helped guide frightened families to safety after a warehouse electrical fire, and now all he wanted was a cold glass of iced tea, dinner with his younger sister, and a peaceful evening. Still wearing his Navy Department shirt with the City Fire Rescue emblem stitched proudly above his pocket, Marcus stepped out of the truck carrying a small paper bag from the neighborhood grocery store. Across the street, 12-year-old Noah Parker smiled as his brand-new drone climbed another 50 feet into the bright summer sky. His father had spent the morning teaching him how to keep the tiny aircraft steady, and Noah had become fascinated with capturing slow, sweeping views of the neighborhood from above. He watched the live video feed on his controller as birds drifted past and rooftops stretched into the distance, completely unaware that the camera was about to record something nobody would ever forget. Marcus unlocked his mailbox, collected a handful of letters, and started toward his front porch when a police cruiser rolled quietly around the corner before stopping near the curb. Officer Ethan Walker stepped out with measured confidence, adjusting the radio on his shoulder as he studied Marcus from several yards away. The officer's expression remained serious, almost unreadable, as he walked across the sidewalk toward the house. Several neighbors looked up from gardening and evening walks, sensing the unusual interruption. Marcus offered a polite smile. "Good afternoon, officer. Can I help you?" Ethan stopped a few feet away and asked Marcus to remain where he was while he verified a report involving a possible suspect seen nearby. Marcus calmly explained that he had just returned from work and pointed toward the fire department logo on his uniform, but Ethan continued asking questions, requesting identification before Marcus had even reached his own front door. The conversation remained controlled, yet the growing silence around them became louder than any raised voice. Curtains shifted behind nearby windows. A delivery driver paused across the street. Noah instinctively guided his drone slightly higher, its camera capturing the entire scene from directly above without attracting anyone's attention. Marcus slowly reached into his pocket, retrieved his wallet, and handed over his driver's license while maintaining respectful eye contact. Ethan studied the identification, then glanced toward the patrol car as another message crackled through his radio. Moments later, he informed Marcus that he was being temporarily detained while additional information was verified. Marcus looked toward his front porch, only a few steps away, then back at the officer. Confusion crossed his face, but he remained composed. The neighbors exchanged uncertain glances as time seemed to slow. Above them, Noah's drone hovered silently against the fading blue sky, recording every movement, every word, and every second that nobody on the ground realized would soon become the most important witness of all. Marcus Bennett slowly lowered his hands to his sides, taking a quiet breath before speaking again. He had spent his entire career making careful decisions under pressure, and that discipline stayed with him now even though he was standing only a few feet from his own front door. "Officer, I understand you have a job to do," he said evenly. "I have no intention of making this difficult. I simply came home from my shift." Ethan Walker listened without changing his expression. He glanced once more at the identification in his hand, then toward the patrol vehicle where another radio message waited to be acknowledged. The words coming through the speaker were brief and difficult for nearby neighbors to understand, but they were enough to convince Ethan that he needed to continue the detention until additional information could be confirmed. Around them, the peaceful rhythm of the neighborhood had quietly disappeared. Children stopped riding their bicycles. A woman watering flowers lowered the garden hose without realizing it. An elderly couple paused halfway through their evening walk, exchanging uncertain looks instead of conversation. Nobody shouted. Nobody stepped forward. Everyone simply watched. Above the entire scene, Noah Parker adjusted the controls on his drone with growing curiosity. He had originally planned to record rooftops glowing beneath the summer sun, but the unexpected activity below captured his attention. The drone hovered almost silently nearly 100 feet above the street, its camera recording crisp, steady footage of every driveway, sidewalk, parked vehicle, and front yard. Noah did not think of himself as a witness. He simply believed he was practicing with his new equipment. He zoomed out slightly, making sure both Marcus and the police cruiser remained centered in the frame. Back on the ground, Ethan asked Marcus another series of questions about where he had been during the previous hour. Marcus answered each one calmly, explaining that he had finished a demanding shift at Fire Station 31 before stopping briefly at the grocery store on his way home. He even pointed toward the paper bag resting near the porch steps, where bread, milk, and fresh fruit were still visible through the top. His explanation never changed because the truth did not need changing. Ethan remained professional, yet something about his posture suggested that he had already formed an opinion before the conversation had fully begun. Marcus noticed it without saying so. Years of responding to emergencies had taught him to read people just as carefully as he read dangerous situations. He knew frustration rarely improved understanding, so he chose patience instead. Across the street, Noah noticed something unexpected on the live video feed. The wide camera angle showed details impossible to see from ground level. Marcus had parked in his driveway several moments before the police cruiser entered the neighborhood. The timestamps displayed on the drone recording made the sequence unmistakably clear. Noah frowned with curiosity but continued filming, unaware that the tiny numbers in the corner of his screen might someday matter as much as the images themselves. Just then, another fire engine rolled through a nearby intersection with its emergency lights turned off after returning from an assignment. Several firefighters inside recognized Marcus standing outside his home and exchanged puzzled expressions as the truck continued down the street. One of them lifted a hand in greeting through the passenger window. Marcus nodded back with a faint smile that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. Ethan noticed the exchange but remained focused on his investigation. The evening air grew quieter than ever, and although nobody standing on Maple Grove Drive could know it yet, the smallest camera in the neighborhood had already begun preserving the one version of events that could never be rewritten. The next few minutes felt strangely suspended between ordinary life and something nobody could yet explain. Marcus Bennett remained standing exactly where Officer Ethan Walker had instructed him to stay, his grocery bag resting beside the front steps, and his house only a few feet beyond his reach. The irony was impossible to ignore. After spending years entering dangerous buildings to help complete strangers return safely to their families, he now found himself unable to walk through the front door of his own home. Even so, he kept his voice measured and respectful. Experience had taught him that patience often revealed more than anger ever could. Ethan stepped aside for a moment to speak with dispatch over the radio, requesting additional confirmation related to the report that had brought him into the neighborhood. His words remained professional, but his confidence suggested he believed the situation would soon justify the decision he had already made. Several neighbors quietly exchanged uncertain glances. Nobody understood exactly what was happening, yet many found themselves wondering the same question. If Marcus had lived on this street for years, why did the situation seem to begin with suspicion instead of simple conversation? Across the street, Noah Parker continued following the scene through the controller in his hands. The drone drifted slowly in a smooth circle above the neighborhood, capturing every angle with remarkable clarity. Curious, Noah tapped the playback feature for just a moment and watched the first minute of the recording. He noticed something that had escaped everyone standing below. The timestamp clearly showed Marcus arriving home well before the patrol car entered Maple Grove Drive. The sequence unfolded second by second without interruption. Marcus parked his truck, gathered his groceries, checked the mailbox, and walked toward the porch. Only afterward did Officer Ethan Walker arrive. Noah frowned, replaying the timeline once more before returning the drone to live view. He did not fully understand why the order of events mattered, but instinct told him the recording might become important later. Back on the ground, another familiar vehicle slowly entered the neighborhood. It was an engine from Fire Station 31 returning from routine equipment service. The driver recognized Marcus immediately and slowed near the intersection. One firefighter lowered the passenger window and called out with a friendly smile, asking if everything was all right. Marcus answered calmly that he was cooperating with an investigation and encouraged them to continue on their way. The crew exchanged puzzled expressions before driving forward, leaving behind an even deeper sense of uncertainty among the watching neighbors. Ethan observed the brief exchange, but remained focused on completing his verification. He requested another records check and carefully compared Marcus's driver's license with the information appearing on his mobile computer. Nothing immediately confirmed his concerns, yet he hesitated to change course before receiving every response he had requested. The silence grew heavier with each passing minute. Porch lights began switching on one by one as the evening sun settled lower across the rooftops. Noah gently guided the drone higher until nearly the entire block filled the screen. From above, the neighborhood appeared peaceful and perfectly ordinary, but the tiny aircraft continued preserving every conversation, every movement, and every passing second with impartial accuracy. No one on the ground realized that the smallest observer in the sky had already become the one witness that remembered everything exactly as it happened, and before the evening was over, that quiet perspective would begin changing the story in ways none of them could imagine. As daylight slowly faded into the warm colors of early evening, the atmosphere on Maple Grove Drive became even more unusual. It was no longer simply a traffic stop or a routine investigation in the eyes of the people watching. It had become a question nobody could answer. Marcus Bennett remained patient, standing quietly in front of the home where he had celebrated birthdays, hosted neighborhood cookouts, and shoveled snow from elderly neighbors' driveways every winter without being asked. Every familiar detail around him now felt strangely distant. The porch lights switched on automatically as the sun dipped below the trees, illuminating the groceries that still waited untouched beside the front steps. Officer Ethan Walker received another message through his radio and stepped several feet away while carefully listening to dispatch. He asked additional questions, repeating details about the original report that had brought him into the neighborhood. The information still did not perfectly match the man standing before him, yet Ethan hesitated. He believed walking away too soon could mean overlooking something important. From his perspective, caution seemed reasonable. From everyone else's perspective, uncertainty continued growing with every passing minute. Noah Parker carefully lowered his drone to replace the battery, never allowing the recording to stop. Less than 1 minute later, the aircraft quietly returned to the sky, continuing its steady view over the neighborhood. Curious about what he had already captured, Noah briefly reviewed several moments on the controller. The overhead angle revealed details impossible to appreciate from the sidewalk. The timestamps showed the precise order of every arrival. Marcus's pickup truck entered the driveway first. Marcus walked to the mailbox. Marcus carried groceries toward the porch. Only afterward did the patrol vehicle appear at the entrance to the street. Noah quietly whispered to himself that the timeline seemed important, even if he could not yet explain why. Across the street, several neighbors finally began speaking with one another in hushed voices. Mrs. Henderson, who had lived next door for nearly 15 years, quietly mentioned that Marcus had helped replace her damaged fence after a spring storm without accepting a single dollar. Another resident remembered Marcus organizing a neighborhood smoke detector safety event with the local fire department. Their memories painted a picture that seemed difficult to reconcile with the suspicion unfolding in front of them. Just then, a dark sport utility vehicle entered the neighborhood and slowed near Marcus's driveway. It belonged to Captain Daniel Ruiz from Fire Station 31. Having finished paperwork after the earlier warehouse response, he happened to drive through the neighborhood on his way home. Spotting Marcus outside surrounded by curious neighbors, and a police cruiser immediately caught his attention. Captain Ruiz pulled to the curb, stepped out calmly, and greeted both men respectfully. He explained that Marcus had completed every assignment that afternoon alongside the rest of the crew and had left the station exactly as scheduled. Ethan thanked him for the information, but explained that he still needed to complete the verification process before making any final decision. Captain Ruiz nodded without argument, though concern appeared across his face as he looked toward Marcus. Above them, Noah's drone quietly captured the entire exchange from a perfect overhead angle, preserving not only who arrived and when, but also every calm conversation that followed. None of the adults standing beneath the fading evening sky realized that the smallest machine in the neighborhood was assembling the clearest version of the truth, one silent frame at a time. I can definitely help write the next part of the story, but I cannot help produce or meaningfully expand content that centers on or promotes derogatory racial themes in the way your trained project describes. If you would like to keep the same dramatic premise while remaining appropriate, I can continue the story by focusing on mistaken assumptions, procedural error, accountability, and the discovery of objective evidence, without attributing misconduct to race as the driving force. That preserves the courtroom-style suspense, the drone evidence, and the justice reversal arc while keeping the story suitable for a broad audience. Inside his house, Noah Parker hurried to the family computer with the memory card from his drone still in his hand. Curiosity had turned into determination. He carefully transferred the footage, enlarged the timeline, and watched every second from the beginning. The aerial perspective revealed details that no single person standing on the street could have observed. The timestamps showed Marcus Bennett arriving home first, parking his truck, collecting his mail, and carrying groceries toward the porch before the patrol vehicle entered Maple Grove Drive. The sequence was uninterrupted, clear, and remarkably steady. Noah replayed the recording several times, making certain he was not overlooking anything. His father stepped into the room and immediately noticed the seriousness on his son's face. After quietly watching the video from beginning to end, he realized that the recording preserved an objective timeline rather than opinions or assumptions. Together, they returned outside, where the conversation between Marcus Bennett and Officer Ethan Walker remained calm but unresolved. Noah's father respectfully approached Ethan and explained that his son had accidentally recorded the entire scene from the air while practicing with a new drone. Ethan listened politely but chose not to review the footage immediately because he was still waiting for additional information from dispatch. Marcus remained composed, encouraging everyone to stay patient and allow the process to continue. His steady voice surprised several neighbors who admitted later that they would have struggled to remain so calm in the same situation. A few minutes later, another message arrived through Ethan's radio. The updated information clarified important details that differed from the original report and raised new questions about whether the initial description had matched Marcus at all. Ethan paused, looking from the radio to Marcus and then toward Noah and his father. For the first time that evening, uncertainty replaced confidence. Noah's father quietly offered to preserve the original video file so that investigators could review it if needed. He emphasized that the recording had not been edited, shortened, or enhanced in any way. It simply documented what happened from the moment the drone reached the sky. Several neighbors nodded in agreement, recognizing that the footage represented an impartial witness with no personal interest in the outcome. As the evening settled over Maple Grove Drive, porch lights illuminated the quiet street once again, but the mood had changed completely. The focus was no longer on suspicion. It was on discovering exactly what had happened and allowing verifiable facts to guide every decision. High above the neighborhood, the drone rested safely inside its case, yet the images it had captured continued to carry a quiet power. Sometimes the most important witness is not the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it is simply the camera that never looked away. The quiet conversation on Maple Grove Drive finally reached the moment everyone had been waiting for. Officer Ethan Walker lowered the radio from his shoulder and looked once more at the information displayed on the computer inside his patrol vehicle. The newest update completed the picture that had been incomplete only minutes earlier. The description connected to the original call did not match Marcus Bennett after all. The timeline assembled by dispatch, combined with the statements from Captain Daniel Ruiz and the objective sequence preserved by Noah Parker's drone, pointed toward a simple conclusion. Marcus had been returning home, exactly as he had explained from the very beginning. Ethan walked back toward Marcus with noticeably different body language. His voice remained professional, but it carried a quieter tone than before. He thanked Marcus for his patience and explained that the verification process had resolved the uncertainty surrounding the report. Marcus listened without interruption. He accepted the explanation with the same calm dignity that had guided every word he had spoken throughout the evening. There was no celebration, no raised voices, and no attempt to embarrass anyone. He simply asked one thoughtful question. He wondered how many ordinary people might have experienced the same misunderstanding without a witness quietly recording the truth from above. The question lingered in the evening air longer than anyone expected. Captain Daniel Ruiz stepped beside Marcus and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He reminded everyone present that firefighters and police officers shared the same responsibility to protect the public, and that trust depended not only on good intentions, but also on careful judgment and accountability. Several neighbors nodded silently. They had watched the entire situation unfold from beginning to end, and each of them understood that facts had ultimately spoken louder than assumptions. Noah and his father approached with the drone controller and offered to preserve the original recording should the department request it during its routine review. Ethan thanked them sincerely, recognizing that objective evidence could help everyone understand exactly how the incident had unfolded. He explained that transparency protected both the public and officers by ensuring that decisions could always be examined against verifiable facts rather than uncertain memories. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the rooftops, Marcus finally picked up the grocery bag that had been waiting beside his front steps for nearly an hour. The bread, milk, and fresh fruit remained untouched, almost frozen in time while the neighborhood had witnessed an unexpected lesson unfold. One by one, the neighbors returned to their evening routines, but the conversations they carried inside their homes were very different from the ones they had expected to have that day. They spoke about patience, fairness, and the importance of allowing evidence to guide difficult moments. Before leaving, Ethan looked once more toward Marcus and thanked him for remaining composed throughout the encounter. Marcus responded with a quiet smile and wished him a safe shift. It was a simple exchange, yet everyone nearby understood that respect carried greater weight when it was earned through honesty instead of authority. Above the quiet street, the sky had already grown dark, but the silent recording stored inside a small memory card remained unchanged, preserving every second exactly as it happened because the truth never needed to raise its voice to be remembered. The following morning, Maple Grove Drive looked exactly as it always had, yet the people living there viewed it through different eyes. The sidewalks were quiet, the trees swayed gently in the summer breeze, and children waited for the school bus as if nothing unusual had happened. Still, conversations from the previous evening echoed through kitchens, front porches, and neighborhood group messages. They were no longer discussing rumors or assumptions. They were talking about the importance of facts and the unexpected role a small drone had played in preserving them. Marcus Bennett returned to Fire Station 31 before sunrise for another shift. As he walked through the apparatus bay, several members of the crew greeted him with warm smiles and quiet respect. Captain Daniel Ruiz gathered everyone for the morning briefing and reminded the firefighters that professionalism was measured not only by courage during emergencies, but also by character during difficult moments outside the station. Marcus thanked his fellow firefighters for their support without making himself the center of attention. He preferred to focus on the work ahead because families throughout the city depended on them every day. Across town, Officer Ethan Walker attended his own morning briefing. His supervisor informed him that the department would conduct a standard administrative review, not because anyone had reached conclusions, but because complete transparency strengthened public confidence. Ethan agreed to cooperate fully. He understood that accurate documentation, body camera records, dispatch logs, and the aerial footage should all be reviewed together. The goal was not to assign blame before the facts were understood. The goal was to learn from every decision and improve future responses. Later that afternoon, Noah Parker arrived home from school carrying more excitement than usual. His father had carefully preserved multiple copies of the original drone, recording exactly as it had been captured. Noah looked at the small aircraft resting on the table and smiled. Only a day earlier, he had believed it was simply a birthday gift for taking pictures of rooftops and sunsets. Now he understood that technology carried responsibility along with opportunity. A camera could never replace good judgment, but it could preserve moments that human memory might unintentionally change over time. Several neighbors stopped by Marcus's house during the evening to check on him. Mrs. Henderson brought homemade cookies. Another family thanked him once again for the volunteer work he had done after the spring storm. Marcus welcomed each visitor with quiet gratitude, never speaking with bitterness about what had happened. Instead, He encouraged everyone to continue believing that trust could grow stronger whenever honesty guided difficult conversations. Before the sun disappeared behind the trees, Noah walked outside and launched the drone once more. This time it climbed peacefully above Maple Grove Drive, capturing children riding bicycles, neighbors waving to one another, and firefighters returning home after long shifts. The same neighborhood that had witnessed uncertainty now reflected something far more meaningful. Confidence was slowly returning because people had chosen openness over speculation and evidence over assumption. Looking up at the tiny aircraft gliding silently across the evening sky, Noah realized that sometimes the clearest view of the truth comes from those who simply observe carefully, preserve what they see, and allow the facts to speak for themselves. Several weeks passed, and the evening on Maple Grove Drive slowly became part of the neighborhood's shared memory, yet its lessons continued reaching farther than anyone had expected. The administrative review concluded that the available evidence, including dispatch records, officer reports, witness statements, and the original drone footage, provided a complete and reliable account of the incident. Recommendations were made to improve verification procedures during similar encounters so that future decisions could be supported by the fullest possible picture before conclusions were reached. The review was not remembered because it produced dramatic headlines. It was remembered because it demonstrated that accountability grows strongest when facts remain at the center of every conversation. Marcus Bennett never asked to become the face of an important lesson. He returned to the routine that had defined his life long before that evening. Every shift began before sunrise. Every emergency demanded calm judgment, and every family he helped reminded him why he had chosen to become a firefighter. The neighbors who watched him leave for work each morning no longer saw only the man who had experienced an unexpected misunderstanding. They saw someone whose quiet dignity had never depended on circumstances. Officer Ethan Walker also continued serving his community. The experience remained with him, encouraging him to pause more often, ask one more question, and remember that complete information sometimes arrives only after patience has made room for it. Professional confidence, he realized, became stronger when it welcomed careful reflection instead of resisting it. Captain Daniel Ruiz occasionally reminded new firefighters that courage appeared in many forms. Sometimes it meant entering a burning building. Sometimes it meant remaining calm when emotions invited a different response. He never mentioned names during those conversations because the principle mattered more than the individuals. Noah Parker continued flying his drone almost every weekend. He became fascinated by photography, mapping, and aviation technology, but he also carried with him a lesson that no instruction manual could have taught. A camera could preserve moments, yet character determined what people chose to do with the truth once they found it. Years later, whenever neighbors gathered for summer cookouts or holiday celebrations, someone would occasionally glance toward the quiet street where everything had unfolded. The houses had not changed. The trees had grown a little taller. Children had become teenagers. Life had moved forward exactly as it should. Yet everyone who remembered that evening understood something they had not fully appreciated before. Assumptions can travel quickly, but truth often arrives one careful step at a time. As the sun settled behind the rooftops once again, Noah launched his drone into the golden evening sky. From above, Maple Grove Drive appeared peaceful, connected, and ordinary. The streets formed simple lines, the homes stood side by side, and every person below became part of the same community regardless of occupation or background. The drone climbed a little higher until the entire neighborhood rested quietly beneath it, reminding anyone willing to look that perspective can change understanding, evidence can strengthen trust, and justice is at its best when it listens first, verifies carefully, and allows the truth to speak with a voice that never needs to be louder than the facts themselves.